Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk to you briefly about buying a car. Okay, so eventually maybe you have a car already, maybe you're thinking about buying a car, maybe you'll be buying a car in the next few years, or maybe it'll be quite a few years before you end up buying a car, or maybe some people don't ever buy a car. But we're going to talk about what it means to buy a car, what it means to finance a car, how you calculate the monthly payments and down payment, and also what it means to lease a car as opposed to buy one. Okay, so maybe you're in that space where you want to buy a car. So, of course, there's a lot of different factors that influence what car you buy, and these are just some of them. So, I included a picture of the make and model of my first car. It was a 2003 Toyota Echo. It was a great little car, very good on gas, a really nice size for me. So when you are looking for a car, obviously some people really prefer new cars and buying new cars or leasing new cars. Some people are fine with used cars. So that makes a big difference. So obviously that will directly impact the price of the car. So you probably, when you're going to buy a car, you've set some sort of a budget for yourself. Other things that are important: fuel efficiency. How many miles to the gallon or kilometers to the liter, I guess, in Canada here. So that's obviously going to very much impact the cost it takes to run your car. How reliable the car is, what kind of reviews it has, what kind of safety ratings. Very, very important, especially for new drivers. Obviously, what the car looks like, its design, the space, its size, anything extra that's in it. So, I don't know, the type of radio or windows or air conditioning or, all those little things you need to take into account. If you're getting it from a dealership or even from a place that sells, secondhand cars, that can really impact your decision because you want to buy from a place that has good customer service, that is helpful and accessible. Again, buying it from a good secondhand dealership is also important. My dad has a guy that he always goes to for secondhand vehicles because he knows that he's very easily reachable and is very good. He also does the any repairs on his vehicle, so that's very, very useful to have. Warranty, also important. If something happens in the first little while, is there a chance to get your money back or get reimbursed for the damage? And also resale value. So is it a car that depreciates very quickly in value, or is it a car that has sort of a wider appeal and will still be worth quite a bit in a few years? Okay, so these are all things that you can consider when you're thinking about buying a car. So maybe you're lucky and maybe you'll save up the money and be able to buy a car outright. If you're buying your first car, it's possible that you buy a secondhand car and it's really not that expensive. So it's possible if you're working to be able to save up enough money to buy it outright. But what happens more frequently is that you end up not having that money, not having just, 10 grand to throw at a car or 20 grand or 30 grand. So what people often do is they finance a car, and that means essentially you're borrowing money to be able to pay for the car and you pay it back in monthly installments. Okay, so obviously we talked about credit cards. This obviously has interest that's pretty significant, but a lot of people end up financing their car just because it's easy, because it's more accessible to be able to pay lowish monthly payments instead of having that money at the beginning to put down up front. So what you end up doing if you want to finance a car is you go to your dealership, and your dealer says, well, these are the offers that we have for this vehicle right now. And then they contact a bank to make sure that, that the loan is good to go. And they also check your credit history. So that's when we talked about credit score. When you're financing a car, obviously they don't want you to have these big outstanding debts, or see that you're always paying back your credit card really late and that you have, X number of $1,000 of debt. Okay, so that's something that they look into. So then after that, you sign the contract. I forgot the R in contract. Haha. And then you're good to go. Okay, and then you start paying off the car. So at the very beginning, often you're given the opportunity to pay a down payment. And often this is about 10% of new cars, 20% of used cars. And this is just a chunk of money that you put down at the beginning. Often it shows the dealership that you have some capital and that you're able to commit to this. But it's also a chunk of money that you don't have to pay interest on. Okay, so it's really beneficial for you to put down a big down payment at the beginning because you won't have to pay interest on it later. All right, so you can do that in cash, or if you already have a car and you're upgrading to something better, then you often can trade that in and get some, if you're getting the same model, you might be able to trade in for that dealership, or you could just sell your old car and use that money as the down payment for the next. All right, so a down payment, it's great. You end up with a lower monthly payment, or fewer monthly payments if it's a big down payment. It depends on the deal and the plan that the dealership has for you. Okay, again, a big down payment also indicates that you're going to be able to pay back the loan, right? It's like a show of wealth, basically. So if you are looking for a loan for a big car, being able to put down the big down payment can make it easier for you to get a loan if, say, you don't have the best credit. Okay, so that's a down payment we do. Of course, down payments are not just for cars. We'll talk about mortgages next day. So I'm next going to give you an equation to calculate the monthly payments on a car. Excuse me. So I'm going to give you this equation. The monthly payment is equal to A0. So A0 is the cost of the vehicle after the down payment. So this is at the beginning of your payments. This is how much you have to pay back, essentially. Okay, so in this case, R is going to be the monthly interest rate. So usually when you finance a car, they give you the financing term, or the amount of time that you're financing the car, in terms of months. Okay, so R is your monthly interest rate. So if you're, like many cases, given an annual interest rate, you have to divide it by 12. Okay, so R is the monthly interest rate, and N is the number of months. Okay, so if you know how much you need to pay for your car, you know the interest rate, you know the term of the of the financing, then you can calculate the payment, and you will have to do that on your worksheet. So I thought I'd give you an example, and this is a lot of numbers, so we're going to take it line by line. So calculate the monthly payment on a $28,100 car with a 10% down payment and an annual interest rate of 7.2% on a 60-month term. Okay, a lot of words, and you probably have heard this kind of lingo around cars before, so let's break it up. So first of all, we are going to pay our down payment. And hold on a second. This is not 10%. Why did I do that? I think I had a typo. So this should actually, my apologies, this is a typo. That should be 8. But for the sake of it, let's just pretend that this is true. Okay, so if you do $28,100 and you times 0.10, right? So 10%. That's a very easy multiplication to do, and for some reason I did it incorrectly. So that helps you calculate how much you need to pay in a down payment. So let's say that that's $2,510, okay, $2,510. So then you can subtract that down payment from how much the car is worth, and you get this is the amount of money that you need to pay back, okay? So your interest rate is 7.2%. That means that your monthly interest rate is 0.072 divided by 12, which is 0.0062. So that's going to be your R in the equation on the previous slide. Okay, so the monthly payment is going to be this number here, okay, the amount that you have left to pay on your car, times this whole fraction. Here's your R. Here's your 1 minus 1 plus R. So you have to remember do that first, then put it to the power of 60, and then do 1 minus that. Okay, order of operations, very important. So if you do that, you plug that in your calculator, you're going to get that the monthly payment is $451.80. So the thing is that we also have to pay sales tax. So if we wanted to calculate what that would be, we can just multiply that by, we could multiply by 0.15 and then add it on, or we could just multiply 451.80 by 1.15, save us a step, and that will give us $519.57. So that would be your monthly payment. So you'd pay about $500 a month every month for 60 months. It's a lot of money. Of course, if you do the math, that's going to give you more than $28,000 because you are also paying interest over 60 months. Okay, so that's calculating monthly payment 101. So not everybody decides to buy a car. A lot of people end up leasing their car. And it's leasing a car is basically like a really long-term rental, okay, with a special agreement. So there's a fixed rate of interest, and it's for a fixed period, okay, or term. So that's usually the minimum, I think, is about 2 years, and usually it goes to about 4 or 5 years, okay. So what happens is you say, okay, I want to lease this car. They give you the keys to this often nice and shiny new car. You drive it and you pay for it for 2 to 4 years. And then at the end, you give the car back. Okay. So one question is, well, how does the dealership determine how much a lease costs? One is, the manufacturer's suggested retail price of the car. So obviously how expensive the car is. There also could be negotiations or discounts or promos going on that dictates how much a lease will cost per month. Residual value and length of lease. So that's residual value is how much the car will be worth at the end of the lease. So again, if it's a car that depreciates in value very quickly, obviously, it's going to impact how much you're being charged per month. If it's a 60-month lease, if it's only a 48-month lease, if it's longer, that's going to impact how much per month. If you're able to pay a down payment, then that will change how much you pay per month. And also, on leased cars, there's often or pretty much always a mileage limit. So there's a maximum number of kilometers that you're allowed to drive your car per month, okay? And this avoids, they put this into place to avoid extra wear and tear on the car. So, pros and cons of leasing a car. So some good things is that there's really little to no down payment. And on the next slide, yes, we'll talk about down payments on leases and why it's actually not a great idea to do a big down payment on a lease. Sometimes you just have to do a security deposit, which is usually 1 month of like the equivalent of 1 month of the lease. When you're doing a lease, you don't have to worry about depreciation. You don't have to worry about reselling your car once you're tired of it or you want a new one. If you're leasing a car, you can often afford a better car and a newer car. Usually leases do happen for nicer cars, and so that is a big advantage to some people to be able to drive the latest technology. It can mean lower monthly payments than if you are buying it. There is sometimes an option also lease to own. So that's basically paying your lease and then giving the opportunity to buy your car at the end of the lease. There's often a pretty good warranty on it for minor things, and you don't have to get an approval for a big car loan. Okay, so you're just paying your monthly rate to drive this nice shiny new car. Okay, so it sounds pretty good. Disadvantages of this is that at the end of the lease, you've been paying all this time and you don't have anything at the end, right? This car is not yours, like if you were buying it. So that's a bit of a disadvantage. Some people feel like it's kind of throwing money away. You're still using your car, obviously, but there's no ownership. Again, there's restrictions on how much you're allowed to drive it, which is tricky for some people. Also, there can be penalties or extra fees if you do drive too much, or if there's too much wear and tear, or if something does happen. Sometimes the fees can really add up in the lease. If you do want to get out of your lease, so maybe your job situation changes or your needs for the car, maybe your family is growing and you need a different car, there's a lot of fees that are involved, especially for terminating a lease early. They really don't like it when you do that, so expect to pay out for that. And also you have to pay a higher insurance rate because, you're basically driving a car that's not yours. So the insurance increases because of that. Okay, a quick note, lease down payments. So I told you that it's really good to do a big down payment when you can for a car because it takes away from the total that you're going to end up paying interest on. If you're leasing, a bigger down payment doesn't really have any advantages. It will decrease your monthly payment, but probably not by very much overall. Since you're not, you're not worried about owning it, so that you're not really paying interest on it. When you're leasing, you're just basically paying to use it. If you're wanting to buy it, you have to pay the interest. So having this big down payment doesn't usually change your interest rate. As long as you're in good standing with your bank and you have decent credit, then you're probably going to get a good rate. Also, if you lease a car and then something happens to it, you're not guaranteed to get that down payment back. Okay, which is, I know you could put like $5,000 into a down payment and then get in an accident the next day and that money is just kind of gone. Okay, so that's, there's obviously no advantage to that. It's definitely better that if you do have the money for down payment, but you still decide to lease a car, to put that down payment money towards something else. So especially if you have other debts with higher interest rates, definitely choose to put it towards that instead of doing the bigger down payment and maybe saving a few bucks a month on your lease payment. All right, another note. So you're like, oh, maybe you're working a lot and $500 a month, like that's something you can do. A gentle reminder that there is a lot of other costs that are involved with owning a car. So you have to pay for insurance, you have to go to the DMV and get your registration. You have to pay for gas, which, well, right now it's quite reasonable, but in general it can be very unreasonable. So that definitely adds up, especially if you're driving some distance. If you're just doing kind of an intercity, it might not be too bad. Maintenance is expensive, so getting it inspected, getting things tuned up, getting your winter tires taken off and put back on. Repairs, so if something goes wrong or you get in an accident, or there's lots of different ways that cars can cost you money, and it can be very surprising about how much they can end up costing. Parking, especially if you're living closer to the downtown core, can be outrageous. So even if you're traveling somewhere, maybe you're going to a park and you have to pay $20 for just to be able to park there for a day. All that definitely adds up. And something that you might not think about is that when you buy a car and you drive it off the lot, that car is instantaneously going to start depreciating. Okay? So, just by having your car and driving it, you're losing money because your car is getting more kilometers put on it. It's getting older. It's starting to get run down. And that obviously decreases the market value if you want to resell it. Okay? So all these things are at the same time costing you money, plus you have your monthly payments, either to buy or to lease. So obviously all these things end up being pretty expensive. So if you're thinking about getting a car, it's a really big decision, and it's very important that you have a stable income in order to be able to finance this without it being too much of a strain on you. Okay, so in the week of April 27th package, the stuff on financing a car is page 1 to 4. So you can use, it gives you blanks to fill in, and you can choose any car you want. Maybe look at some of the paperwork that you've done before, especially like the Imagining Life at 40. Definitely choose a car that's, reasonable for the amount of income that ideally you'd be receiving. So, if your aspiration is to be, a teacher, maybe that, $100,000 car is not the one that you should be choosing. So make sure that you're choosing a car that's reasonable in those opportunities where you do get a choice to fill out this this worksheet. Okay, well, thanks for listening.